dwelling units in a single detached, semi-detached, and townhouse, row house dwelling structures throughout the town of Coburg, subject to specific criteria. Are there any declarations from interest from members of council? Seeing none, we can proceed. Notification procedures from the municipal clerk.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I can report that notice was published in the local newspaper, posted on the municipal website, and circulated to neighboring property owners in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act.
Thank you. The explanation of proposed zoning bylaw amendment, planning report from Manager of Planning Services dated January 13th, 2017 regarding the application of the zoning bylaw amendment accessory dwelling units. Proceed, Mr. Franklin.
There we go. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the fall of 2016, the municipality received a letter from the Minister of Housing, specifically speaking to the long-term affordable housing strategy which the province has passed, initially in 2010, taking effect in 2012, and further follow-up this past fall with the implementation of Bill 7, which was the Promoting Affordable Housing Act, which the province is taking great lengths to inform municipalities of what their responsibilities were under that act. In this case, the bill proposes to amend the Development Charges Act and the Building Code to reduce costs associated with adding secondary suites or secondary units and improve the flexibility and affordability while maintaining safety standards. Critically, actually, is the maintaining of safety standards. Town of Coburg actually had, in its 2010 official plan, put policies in place specifically speaking to adding secondary suites to conform with the provincial this provincial directive. However, the 2010 official plan is still under appeal and still before the Ontario Municipal Board. Therefore, we weren't able to use those specific policies in this instance to tell the province that we were in conformity with their new direction, or ongoing direction, I should say, and went back to our 2001 official plan that had some very general language about accessory units being permitted in single and duplex dwellings. In this case, it did not specifically refer to row or townhouses. It did also not specifically refer to coach houses or secondary suites in accessory structures. However, we feel as planning staff that this is implied, and although not specifically specified directly in the official plan from 2001, that with modifications to the zoning bylaw, since it is the regulatory document, would definitely be reasonable in this instance, while we're still await, hopefully later this spring, to have the 2010 official plan actually approved by the Ontario Municipal Board, and we can move forward on major zoning bylaw changes to adopt that document. In this letter from the Minister, actually it specified that municipalities are directed to have this work done before the end of March. Obviously, the town of Coburg takes a direction like this very seriously, and we as professional planning staff believe that this direction was something that we needed to move forward on quickly. Through December and into November, or into January, we've been working on some concepts and what language would make sense in a revised document, and I presented that forward both for public consumption this evening, in my staff report, and taking that forward to the Planning Advisory Committee. We're also discussing this with our partner departments, particularly input from our fire and building department, so they'll be our close colleagues dealing with this, along with engineering because of the potential impact to services, to try to understand what kinds of implications to municipality a revised policy like this may incorporate. Mr. Chair, secondary suites can provide a very affordable, a source for affordable housing for low and moderate income households to either be able to afford increasing costs in mortgages, for new first-time home buyers or downsizing home buyers to be able to afford new mortgages in this increasing world of mortgage costs and housing prices. It also gives the ability for younger folk, as we know, and certainly the number of folks I've talked to over the last 6 years since we actually implemented a lot of this draft language in the 2010 official plan, Mr. Chair, specifically asking, I would say on at least monthly, if not weekly basis, that new homeowners are asking about secondary suites, that they have their 20-year-old child who's finished university and isn't able to find work and needs to come back home to live again. But they don't want to go back to their own bedroom upstairs. They want to have their own space. We also see the same kind of thing where people's parents don't need to move into a retirement home, but need to have less maintenance of their land. So again, these are potential from a family perspective. Of course, this could also be rental income. If a homeowner is going to invest the kinds of monies around putting together a bright, safe environment, a second kitchen, plumbing, electrical work, a safe second entrance, those kinds of expenses to a homeowner, whether they be for a family member or for rental income, need to have the correct direction and be able to be afforded over time. Coburg currently has a very low rental market rate. The rental vacancy rate in Coburg is typically very low. This has been a criteria that we've had many discussions with CMHC since they keep track of that on a national level, because it has specific implications when we look at rental market conversion of larger buildings to condominium. If we're not over at least a 4% vacancy rate, there's direction not to move forward with condominiumization. That's held back projects in the past. So certainly we see the ability to have more rental accommodations available for folks who were looking for that kind of living accommodations, that it just makes sense. With reviewing a proposal such as this, because it's been a staff initiated amendment to our proposal, or to the zoning bylaw, we've looked at the language in the Plan Act, which has been changed several times actually since the 2010 Plan Act, to specifically identify secondary suites both within the home, again single detached, semi-detached, and row or townhouses, as well as secondary suites in accessory structures where there's no secondary unit in the house. We're using the term coach house. Typically, coach house usually refers to a loft apartment up above a garage. However, in this instance, because I think the term house makes more sense, that a coach house being that converted garage, whether it be above or on the main floor of that garage, could be converted into a second suite. Obviously, it would need to have services installed to it, which would be split off from the main lines from the house, but this is a potential where there's no other second suite. There are already policies in certain sections of town, particularly the New Amherst secondary planning area, which is the West Park Village, as well as the New Amherst subdivisions, and into the new subdivision at Cedar Shores on King Street West, where coach house provisions have specifically been implemented. At this point, we've had no uptake at all in the last 10 years for coach houses, and because of the potential impacts for privacy and servicing, we're seeing that these would probably suit the larger, historic large type lots, whether they be in the rural environment or the larger estate type housing lots that would be part of either the old town or newer subdivisions where the land has been set aside for a coach house, which could be separate from the main building, and are suggesting larger lots for this and a maximum dwelling size. Also specifically that these dwellings could not be severed off onto their own lot. Mr. Chair, within the official plan currently there's specific language in the affordable housing section, section 3253 of the official plan, talking about in that section about amending the zoning bylaw to permit accessory apartments without a zoning amendment subject to certain regulations. In this case, planning staff are trying to put forward those specific zoning regulations so that all folks in town would have that opportunity as long as they met those minimum standards. The province is also specifying that accessory apartments shall not be subject to density requirements. So in this case, even if it was a smaller lot where typically it would be a higher density, because on a 50 by 100 foot lot, when you've already got which is a quote-unquote standard lot within the town, that if you already had one unit on that, to add that second unit, it might be higher than the 20 or 50 units per net hectare, which is a general planning calculation for density. In this case, the province has specifically said to not have those density restrictions because of lot sizes, to not restrict that the potential for secondary units must fall under reasonable planning criteria. In this case, our recommendation is around minimum lot sizes of 9 meters, that there be an extra parking space installed non-tandem in this instance for that extra unit, so that any structure or any dwelling lot that had 2 units would have a minimum of 3 parking spaces. This would keep extra cars off of the streets or front yards, but actually allow them to be in a reasonable driveway type situation. And we're also recommending non-tandem so that you don't have potentially a renter's car parked on a linear driveway. A little different in a family situation where you can go and borrow somebody's keys and go and move a car on a Friday night at 11 o'clock. But if it's a tenant or a renter, that would be very challenging to do. Again, Mr. Chair, we're looking at the potential to minimize neighborhood conflicts with these regulations, to allow for secondary suites in single detached, semi-detached, row or townhouse units, as well as the potential for accessory structures to be converted into a secondary unit where there is no other secondary unit present on the lot. Again, within the regulations. And those draft regulations are certainly out for public consumption, and separate from this evening's meeting would be available for discussion either with staff either later this evening or ongoing up until they may be requested by council and finally passed. Specifically as well, Mr. Chair, just to make it properly known, because this has been a provincial directive, there is no appeal period to this regulation. Once council passes it, there's no 20-day appeal period to the Ontario Municipal Board in this instance. It is not site-specific to applying to individual lots, but to be applied town-wide. This is an update to definitions and will be implemented then through an in-house registry between the planning department and the building department, with appropriate permits issued by the building department for any new unit. And we're hoping to work with the building department to specifically look at how we can work with existing homeowners who have secondary suites in them that may or may not be safe right now, and we'd like to work with those folks to be able to make sure that they are safe, that they do provide enough parking on those lots, and to get those folks to move forward with having them on that same registry. This partnership would also entail the Coburg Fire Department with their residential home inspectors to, again, work with folks. They have specific regulations actually on the retrofit of existing structures, again, to try to help homeowners make these new rental spaces safe. And that is our primary key. And that planning policy not be a holdback or a restriction for homeowners to be able to put in secondary suites. Mr. Chair, with that, I'd be happy to take any of council's questions.
Are there any questions from council on clarity? Mayor Braconier?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to be clear that what we're talking about is one accessory unit per residential structure. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, just to clarify exactly, this will be one additional secondary unit per lot. So if it was already a duplex, one up and one down, it wouldn't qualify for a third, nor would it qualify for a coach house, even if it was on a large property. The maximum would be 2 units, a primary residential unit and a secondary residential unit in some form on any individual property, as long as it met minimum criteria.
Any other? Deputy Mayor Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Franklin. Mr. Franklin, it's also my understanding that our attempt here is to make things reasonable and fair, but my understanding is if the ministry decided it was not, the minister has the right to oversee any recommended change accepted by council. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, I can clarify in that matter. Although there's no specific appeal period, the minister has reserved the right to override any bylaw the municipality passes, or in the future to pass a provincial-wide regulation or a municipal-specific regulation which would override any policy that we pass. Certainly we understand that not all municipalities have been as forthcoming as Coburg has been towards actually writing policies this way. Conversely, there's other municipalities that are far ahead of us with secondary suite policies. If the minister feels that our or their policies aren't sufficient, do not meet the minister's or ministry's intentions around affordable housing, that they may be able to alter those things. And should any formal regulation come at the provincial level, it would override our bylaw. Hopefully that doesn't happen, because we spent some time trying to create a Coburg solution.
Any other questions from members of council? Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman, the next item on the agenda is a memo from the Secretary of the Coburg Planning and Sustainability Advisory Committee. The following motion was adopted at the January 17th, 2017 meeting of the Planning Sustainability Advisory Committee. Moved by Gudrun Ludorf Weaver that council be advised that the Planning and Sustainability Advisory Committee has duly considered the application by staff to add a new subsection in the general provision section 5 of the comprehensive zoning bylaw, bylaw 85-2003, to permit accessory dwelling units in single, detached, semi-detached, and row townhouses, as well as to permit coach house dwelling units where no second unit exists, subject to the regulations of the implementing bylaw, and endorses the conclusions of the planning report dated January 13th, 2017, and that motion was carried.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to be taking public submissions. We request all persons addressing the public meeting to state their name and their address for the official record of the public meeting. At this time, we'll take public submissions in support.
Hello, Mr. Chair.
Oh.
My name is Michael Dominguez. I live at 14 Chatsworth Crescent in Whitby, Ontario. I also own a 6-unit building here in Coburg at 17 Buchanan in Coburg. Just a little about myself. As I mentioned, I've owned that sixplex since 2010. I also personally own 7 legal 2-unit dwellings in the Oshawa and Whitby area. I'm also, as a realtor, I specialize in investment properties, and I've participated in well over 100 2-unit suite sales, including about 50 in the last year in the mainly in the Durham region. I also regularly write articles for the Canadian Real Estate Wealth magazine, and I've won Realtor of the Year for working with investors. So I just wanted to share some of my thoughts. I'm really excited about this particular policy here in Coburg. As a landlord in this area, I've seen my share of illegal basement apartments that are already here. They've been existing for many, many years. I think we've all seen or heard of them. These will make safer apartments. Residents will be forced to go through the process to ensure that they meet the Ontario standards, and so I think we're going to see a whole lot of simply safer 2-unit suites, and so that's going to be a positive for the community. A second point is that we will be the ability of having more residents in the town with no more infrastructure. Coburg, as we all know, is a great place to live. People want to like to work in this community and live in this community, and by adding more residents currently means adding more streets and sidewalks. By adding second suites to an existing neighborhood, means no additional roads, sidewalks, parks, garbage pickup, or anything along that sort. Next is resale value. In the Durham market, suited properties are simply leading the market in price point. One of the concerns that that people sometimes bring up is we don't want secondary suites in our backyard. We don't want our neighbors doing it. I can tell you that in order to meet the legal requirement, we're actually seeing these properties are some of the most desirable on a street, and they've and like I said, they've led the market in terms of price point, and has actually brought the rest of the street up in value as well. And so people that are owning real estate here in town are going to see their property values increase as a result of that. It makes properties easier to sell. As already been mentioned, we are in an active market as we speak right now, and that properties are selling quickly. However, adding a secondary suite will not only open up for future investors, but as was mentioned, first-time home buyers that are having a challenge in purchasing properties in this particular time, having a legal second suite is actually accepted by banks and lending institutions in order to help them qualify. So people that currently can't afford a home might be able to actually afford a home with having a legal second suite. The other advantage, as was mentioned as well, is we're seeing a real trend towards multi-generational families living in the same house. So one could live in one level and their child or parents could live in the second. That way you're living with them under the same roof, but not that close, which is kind of nice. Another point is it adds jobs, and that's something that isn't necessarily spoken about very often. There are local residents and other investors that want to invest in this town. They want to hire local contractors, buy product at local stores, hire local property managers, and this will simply add jobs to the community. Affordable housing. There is such a housing shortage in this community that rents for quality apartments are in some cases actually more expensive than the Durham region. Adding a new supply of quality, safe apartments will go into the rental pool and aid in the undersupply of rental properties. And lastly, increasing the tax base. More residents simply add to the tax base, and if properties are reassessed, then that could lead to higher municipal taxes for a property. That will come in time, obviously, but by adding a second suite, your appraised value could be higher, and that would lead to actually more tax dollars. It's been my experience that adding second suites has been a great benefit to the Durham region. I've seen investors building quality rental units and improving the communities. I've seen first-time investors actually be able to afford their first home with the help of a tenant in one unit. And I've seen property values and demand increase, building wealth for the current property owners. Thank you.
Thank you for your submission. Are there any questions of clarity from council or staff? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. Do we need, if you could submit your submission to
Sure.
Mr. Blashen? Sure. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to put some submissions in support? Okay, thank you. Step forward.
Hello. My name's Sarah Copeland. I live at 149 Abbott Boulevard in Coburg. I actually own TAG Property Management here in town. I opened my property management company back in 2013. Currently, I manage about 200 units in and around town. I own 31 myself. I have 5 properties that I own in Coburg and a couple of others in the Northumberland area. And I have been waiting and waiting and waiting for this bylaw to be amended and come through, just for the benefit that it's going to bring our community and myself as an investor as well. I believe that this type of zoning amendment will really help our community. It's going to help our tenants, the people who can't afford to buy and own housing themselves, in that they will have a better selection of properties to choose from. We have in our inventory of rental properties quite a number of unupdated units that people have to take advantage of, and they have to choose to live in those units because they don't necessarily have other options. I believe that allowing for the secondary suites to be put in place, that our increased inventory of rental units on the market will allow tenants to be a little bit choosier as to what they're choosing, and it will actually force our, and I'm going to put a term here, and some people might not like it, but slumlords in the area who don't put money into their units and update them to a level of quality. It'll force them to have to do improvements to their properties as well to be able to be competitive with those secondary units. Because typically when you're renovating a secondary unit, you have to do quite a bit of construction, and so you can't just say, okay, now all of a sudden my unit's a secondary suite and it's legal. They're going to be renovated units, and they're going to be of a certain safety standard and quality. There are a number of secondary suites already out there, and I've seen some horrendous things. I've actually turned down a number of clients who wanted me to manage their properties due to safety concerns as well. There aren't proper ceiling heights, there aren't proper egress, and they exist and they're there. And people are renting them because they have to. They don't have an option in our community where we actually have a shortage in housing. This, of course, is going to help investors like myself as well. These units, for us to buy a single-family home and convert, it is very lucrative for us as investors as well, which is the incentive for us to do it. So it helps bring investment dollars, and as Michael was saying, like the people are doing this in Durham, people are willing to come into our community of Coburg here and bring investment dollars, hiring local contractors, hiring local property management companies like myself, buying their materials here and then renting to our tenants. So it does help investors. It also helps first-time home buyers as well. And I was one of those first-time home buyers. Back in 2007, I bought my first investment property in Coburg. The only thing I could afford was a duplex. Basically, I went to the bank and they said, well, you actually need a second income to qualify for a mortgage. And seeing as I didn't have a partner at that time, I had to get a tenant. And so it actually allowed me to be able to buy my first house. And we're going to be able to help a number of other not necessarily only young people. It's not only the 20-somethings out of college who are looking to buy. It's divorcees, like people who are divorced and their finances aren't what they used to be. I rent to so many people transitionally when they're in between houses during divorce periods, and they're taking their family and they're trying to split it up into separate housing, and being able to have a house with a basement apartment would actually really help those people as well. Also, looking at the basement units, it's a much easier way to increase housing versus building multi-unit buildings. I've been working with a particular realtor in town who's looking at trying to sell land in order to build multi-unit buildings, and it's a really extensive process. And as you all know, you probably know better than I do, I'm actually quite new at the whole multi-unit game. With this, if you were to get 20 secondary units, that's building essentially a 20-unit building without additional infrastructure. You don't have to put extra sidewalks or sewage or electricity. You've got 20 people out there converting their homes and providing the value of a 20-unit building, which is extraordinary. 20 extra units for people to live without an additional footprint on our society and our community. Now, I know one of the things that people might say a negative to this is that neighbors don't necessarily want renters next door to them. And I don't think that is, in most cases, a valid concern. As I said, I manage about 200 units in and around the area, and if properties are managed properly and the people who are taking care of them are active landlords and active in making sure that their tenants are abiding by noise bylaws and doing the things that they need to do, if they're inspecting their units and they know what's going on in their properties, it causes less of a nuisance and a problem for the people around them. Another thing that I think will be much of a benefit as well is rent values for affordable housing. Now, investors coming in and investors buying these properties, and it's the reality, we look at the bottom line. What can we buy the property for? What do we have to put into it? And what's the maximum rent that we can get for it? And that's a reality of being a real estate investor, and that's what we look at. On the other side of that, though, we're going to have homeowners who are retired and maybe don't need their basement, who don't have a mortgage, who are wanting to put in a secondary suite, and their concern is just to have some extra income coming in. They are going to be able to offer these units at a more affordable price. The couple who is buying the property with the secondary suite so that they can afford their mortgage. They don't need to have maximum cash flow. They're going to be able to offer more affordable housing to people in the area as well. And I think that that's a great benefit as well. It's not just investors buying these properties, it's also the people who are living here and just trying to get a little bit of extra cash in their pocket. Now, one thing, my last remark here is in regards to the percentage. Typically, when you look at a bungalow property, you've got your top floor and your basement, and they have the same footprint. And I just urge you to maybe look at the percentage of allowable space for the secondary unit. It's much easier to do the whole basement as the apartment as opposed to just 40%, which is I think what we're looking at. I'm not sure if we could look at that, but putting that constriction on it might be a little bit difficult because that extra 10% could allow for an additional bedroom, which would allow a greater number of potential tenants to rent that unit. Being able to have 2-bedroom units as opposed to 1 bedroom would make a big impact on the number of tenants that we could help with these types of units. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your submission. And are there any questions of clarity from staff or council?
Okay, thank you.
Seeing none, if you could give your submission.
I literally
anything.
scribbled it on the back
Okay.
of the
Thank you.
agenda. So there you go. Sorry.
Hello? Are you?
I didn't
support?
come here intending to make a submission, and this one will be very brief. I'm John Hinman. We live at 186 Albert Street, and there's been a lot of talk about investing and first-time home buyers getting in the market and all that, but there is one other side of that. All that's true, but there's one other side of the market, the way our market is in Coburg right now, and that is for anybody looking to purchase a home, they're almost non-existent, but the same is true of rental units. And part of that is because Coburg has become such a popular place. We've been discovered for quite a while, but we've really been discovered now. So historically, because there weren't a lot of legal rental buildings out there, real estate investors in Coburg would be people from our generation and before that were buying nice little 3-bedroom bungalows on a nice quiet street on Westwood Drive or places like that, and renting them out. Well, guess what happens when the market goes the way ours goes? Real estate prices have shot up in Coburg. Average house price is somewhere around $350,000, but that includes all properties. Well, if you're a real estate investor that's owned a bungalow in Coburg and you've been renting it out to maybe 3 families over the last 30 years, but you've decided to get out of the business now because house prices have gone up, then that property goes on the market. And the people that buy it aren't investors, they're first-time buyers, they're people that are looking to buy a home in Coburg. I guess what I'm leading up to is that we've seen more and more and more, I'm in real estate, we've seen more and more and more of these homes coming on the market, and what it's done is it's taken, I mean, when you're dealing with the tenants that have been living in there for quite a while, because you know they have to find a place to go. And when they have to find a place to go now, a lot of cases they're looking outside Coburg, they're looking to Colburn, they're looking further east. They don't want to, but there's nothing to rent. So what's happening is not only are the properties being sold, but of course at the same time there's new families coming to the area, or there's young families within the area that are buying, and they're getting their first home, but tenants are gone, and there's a rental unit that comes off the market. And that's happening every day. There are just more and more units that we're losing that have been rentals over the years. So something like this can be a godsend, especially when it's something that is going to happen anyway from our perspective. So might as well be sooner than later, because there needs to be something done that's going to replace like long-term functional rental units. I don't have anything written down, Glenn, so I can't give you anything.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions or clarity from staff or council? Seeing none. Thank you. Any other submissions in support?
It's not my phone. Hi, my name is Christina Nair, and I'm a nurse at the health unit. I'm also a resident at 632 Sprague Crescent, but I'm here in my health unit hat tonight because affordability is of course, an indicator for us to health. If people can't afford a place to live, it impacts their health, and that's a concern of ours. I didn't really think that I would speak, again, nothing written down, but just one really quick point, which is removing the barriers to actually seeing this have an impact. I think this is one really small piece to the pie of affordability, and increasing our vacancy rate from now 0.5 to try to start to get it going again. But I love that it's creative and that it's something that we are considering, and I fully support it. To reduce the barriers to doing that, we have to address the parking piece, which is the number one barrier to seeing this happen. And if we're talking about actually building for affordability, hopefully we're making it affordably to the point that it does reach the individuals who most desperately need it. They often don't have a car. So in stating that we have to have the car spaces is maybe actually the barrier that we need to address to see this go to fruition. So incentives for people to do it, I think you mentioned that there are opportunities to do this, they're not being taken. Promotion and incentives to do this are really important, and decreasing that issue around parking, I think, does need to be addressed. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions of clarity or no? Seeing none. Thank you. Any more submissions in support?
Good evening. My name is Dan Bolger. I live at 9 June Avenue in Hamilton Township, and I have a couple of income properties here in Coburg. I'm looking at it from a little bit of a different perspective, not from the building and planning, because I am in support of the secondary suites. I guess my question is about the taxation of the secondary suites. Is the town of Coburg considering changing their formula and how they tax these properties as they are now? And with the secondary suites being put in, will the formula change, and how will that affect a homeowner? That's all I've got.
Thank you. Any questions or clarity for Dan on that? Seeing none. Any public submissions in support? Okay, seeing none. Any public submissions in opposition? Okay, I see no public submissions in opposition. Any written comments, submissions received by the municipal clerk as of printing of the agenda?
I'm not aware, Mr. Chairman, of any submissions.
Are there any written comments from commenting agencies?
Mr. Chair, in this instance, we received comments from the engineering department, public works department, that they have no concerns at this point. We're still looking at, again, dealing with building and fire department in a little bit more detail on the specifics, and a couple of questions have been raised tonight as well before bringing forward a bylaw, depending on council's wishes.
Thank you. All persons requiring notice of passage of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment are advised to advise the municipal clerk of their name and address to ensure the receipt of the notice. I would call for adjournment. Deputy or Councillor McCarthy.